Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, 26 rapid fire bookish questions. I'm doing the hot or not A to Z book tag. So this tag was created by Greg from the channel Another Bibliophile Reads, a fantastic channel, well worth checking out. If you don't know what a tag is, it's a series of questions that people on BookTube ask each other to get, different people's opinions on things. So this tag is designed to be very rapid fire. As I said in the intro, it is 26 questions based on the letters of the alphabet, and you're just supposed to answer hot or not to each thing. You can give a little bit of explanation, and I no doubt will, because I probably won't be able to restrain myself. But yeah, the idea is that you give a very brief answer for each thing. So the first one then is A, obviously, which is audiobooks. So I'm going to go hot for audiobooks. So I've been really enjoying audiobooks recently. They give me a good way to read more stuff, basically, and sometimes they add a little something extra to the book as well. So audiobooks, definitely hot for me. B is for Bildungsroman, which is a posh way of saying coming of age book. I think I'm going to go not for this. So I'm not a huge fan. I certainly wouldn't read like literary fiction that was a coming of age story. I think it can be an interesting additional thing to like genre fiction, but I wouldn't go out of my way to read a Bildungsroman. C, children's books, not for me. So my kid is 15 now, so the days of reading bedtime stories are long gone. I used to love it, back then. But yeah, I don't read children's books anymore. I got my fill of them when I was doing the bedtime story routine. D is for digital. So yes, definitely hot. Big fan of digital books, big fan of Kindles and things like that. Talk about them fairly regularly on the channel. Probably 50% of what I read is read digitally. So yeah, definitely hot. E is for experimental. That's definitely a not for me. I like, classically written stuff, mid 20th century prose, nice and simple, nothing too fancy. So yeah, definitely not a fan of experimental. F is for fantasy. Again, not. So used to like fantasy when I was a teenager. Not something I'm interested in anymore. I get why people like it, but I'd just rather read something more rooted in the real world. G is for graphic novel. I'm probably going to go with not for that as well. So there are many graphic novels I've really enjoyed over the years. Used to love them, particularly when I was a teenager. Read tons of comics and things back then. But nowadays, whilst I still read them occasionally, I will definitely tend to reach for a novel rather than a comic or manga or whatever. H is for horror. Definitely hot. Still a big fan of horror. I've loved horror for kind of 35, 40 years. Still really enjoy it. Still finding fresh stuff out there in the horror genre. I think that the genre is more diverse and interesting than ever at the moment. So definitely hot for me. I is for inspirational. Definitely not. Like the knottiest knot you can possibly imagine. The idea of reading something that's supposed to, that's designed to inspire me, really turns me off and would just make me feel cynical going into reading it and make it less likely to inspire me. I'm not averse to, there being the odd message in the books that I read, but I definitely don't want it to be kind of front and centre. J is for journalism. Probably going to go not for that as well. So don't have any problem with journalism, but again, it's not something I would reach for. I would always reach for a novel rather than non-fiction, to be honest with you. K is for kitsch, so something with a popular or sentimental appeal. So yes, definitely hot. I love kitschy stuff. That's kind of, in a sense, what Garb August is all about. So yeah, I'm a big fan of overly sentimental, overly melodramatic kind of fiction. So I'm definitely going to go with a big yes, a big hot for kitsch. L is for library. So I'm going to go hot. So I definitely 100% approve of libraries. I think they're wonderful. As a kid, I lived in the library pretty much. But I find myself using the library less and less. And I think part of the reason for that is that I read a lot of stuff digitally, as I've said, and just the ease of buying things digitally and being able to read them straight away for me is a real plus. The problem with libraries is, they do have, so my library does have digital books that you can borrow, but the range is really quite small, whereas they have a lot more physical books in the library, but you have to go there to get them. So I'm kind of on the fence a bit maybe about library. M is for mystery. So yes, big fan of mystery novels. I'm probably second to horror in terms of my favourite forms of fiction. I think there's something wonderful about a mystery novel and just that the crafting of them and things like that. Obviously they can be terribly done, but a well done mystery novel is a wonderful thing. I'm not doing a very good job at giving really succinct answers, am I? N is for non-fiction, so I'm going to go not for that. So as with journalism, I just prefer fiction. I don't have anything against non-fiction. I do read non-fiction occasionally, but probably 90% of what I read is fiction. O is for omnibus, and I'm assuming by omnibus we mean a collected a volume that collects several individual volumes. So they can be great. So I've got some Library of America books somewhere up there, which are wonderful and a quite affordable way of getting really high quality copies of books. You typically get like 4 novels in a Library of America volume. The problem with omnibuses is they tend to be, by design they're big, so they can be good value, but they tend to be big and heavy. And I tend to like small compact paperbacks rather than big heavy books. Next up, P for poetry. Definitely not a fan of poetry. There are exceptions. There are some poets and books of poetry I have enjoyed, but I would never reach for poetry over a novel, I don't think. Q is for quests, where Greg clarifies that this is when the sorry, can't speak. When the protagonist goes on a quest, physical or spiritual. So someone else, I can't remember who it was, I think it might be Roy from Roy Reads Anything, when answering this question said, all novels are kind of quests. So, as I've said, I'm not a fan of fantasy books where, which you tend to think of when you think of quest, don't you? But actually, mystery books are often quests, the quest for the truth. And I do think the format of a quest is an interesting format. I quite like episodic novels where the character goes to a place, does a thing, goes to another place, does another thing, and so on and so forth. So I think I'm probably going to go hot for quests, just not fantasy quests. R is for romance. So yes, increasingly I'm a fan of romantic fiction, particularly kind of category romance type stuff. Harlequin, Mills Moon, and so on. So yes, definitely a fan of romance, and also just enjoy romantic subplots in other novels of other genres. I think romance always has something interesting to a book. S is for science fiction, so I'm going to go not for this one as well. So have in the past been a huge fan of science fiction, particularly when I was a teenager, and there are many science fiction novels that I think are truly excellent. But generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of the genre. I tend to prefer, as I've said when I answered the fantasy question, more grounded kind of stuff. T is for translation, books translated from one language into another. Don't really care one way or the other, to be honest with you. I just want to read the books. So it's great that books are translated into English from other languages because it means that I can read them, but I'm certainly not someone who seeks out translated fiction. U is for Übermensch. They're Superman or extraordinary human characters who can do everything. So I think everyone I've seen, who's answered this question has gone not for this, but I'm going to go hot for this. I do quite like an Übermensch. So I've just read one of the Doc Savage books, and he's like definitely an Übermensch. But I think what's his name? Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher is kind of an Übermensch as well, in that he's really powerful, he's really smart, he knows everything. I actually think, whilst it can feel like kind of lazy storytelling to have a character like that, it presents challenges for the author in terms of coming up with ways to still make the book gripping and exciting and interesting. And I think books that do that feature an Übermensch as the hero are actually really interesting and fun. So I'm going to go hot for Übermensch. V is for Victorian literature from 1837 to 1901. so I'm going to go not. There are certainly examples of Victorian fiction I've enjoyed, but generally speaking, I prefer kind of 1950s onwards, I guess. W is for Western. So yes, I'm a fan of Westerns. So hot for Westerns. I think Westerns are fun, enjoyable escapism. They can definitely be politically challenging at times. So that's but that can make them more interesting in a way, because it gives you a window on, you know, a different way of thinking about the world. I do think Westerns are particularly interesting in terms of their constant replaying of the American dream. I think that's quite an interesting thing to read about. You know, Westerns have fallen out of fashion, but the American dream, you know, lives on, doesn't it? And it's interesting to read different versions of the American dream, whether you agree that it's the right dream to have or not. So Westerns, yep. Next, X is for X-rated. So not a big fan of sex in books. I find it tends to just distract from the story. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, let's definitely go not for that one. Y is for young adult. So I'm going to go not for this as well. So there are certainly young adult books I've enjoyed, but I would typically much rather read a book aimed at adults. And Z is for Zeitgeist, the spirit or mood of the times. So this is a difficult one. So I don't like books that sell themselves as being particularly, you know, of the now, you know, particularly zeitgeisty. I find that a bit annoying, and often books that do that actually end up being, you know, having latched onto something that very quickly feels dated and pointless. However, I think, as with what I said about Westerns, I think there's something fascinating about reading popular fiction from the past to tap into, you know, some of the kind of like ephemera of the time, really. So just little details about life that you might not otherwise learn about from history books. I've learned about, you know, like different weird sandwiches that people used to eat, things like that from old books. That's a very strange example, isn't it? But you know what I mean. That the kind of details of day-to-day life that don't get recorded in the history books, but do get referred to in novels, because they just, you know, the people in novels are just normal people doing normal stuff. So I think I'm going to go hot for Zeitgeist. Okay, that was my 26 answers, reasonably quick answers to 26 questions from Greg. I'm not going to tag anyone because I think pretty much everyone has done this tag already. But do let me know in the comments what your answers for some of the questions would have been. Let me know if any of my answers surprised you. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.